The bathroom door exploded open while I was showering. I thought it was over, until the corrupt cop realized whose daughter he'd just terrorized. Big mistake. The steam had always been my sanctuary, a warm embrace that washed away the weight of my criminology studies. As a 30-year-old black woman navigating academia while carrying the invisible burden of being FBI Director Marcus Grant's daughter, these moments of solitude were precious. The hot water cascaded over my skin, carrying with it the stress of analyzing crime scenes and dissecting criminal psychology. My apartment was my fortress, small but meticulously organized, every detail carefully chosen. The deep walnut floors gleamed under soft lighting, and the scent of jasmine and lemongrass from my diffuser created an atmosphere of peace. I'd worked hard to make this space feel like home, independent of my father's towering reputation. But tonight was different. Tonight I was bait. For weeks, Dad and I planned this operation. Someone in Detective Cole Harris's precinct was feeding information to the Hernandez cartel, and we'd narrowed it down to Harris himself. The fake video we'd leaked, supposedly showing cartel activity I'd accidentally recorded, was designed to flush out the rat. My heart hammered against my ribs as I thought about what was coming. The crash that shattered my sanctuary was violent and sudden, the front doors splintering like kindling. My breath caught in my throat, every muscle in my body going rigid. The sound of heavy combat boots on my walnut floors sent ice through my veins. Clear. The voice was harsh, gravelly, scraping against the tranquility I'd built here. This was it. The trap was sprung, but now I had to play my part perfectly. One mistake, and everything Dad and I had worked for would crumble. I forced my breathing to slow, pushing down the very real fear that threatened to overwhelm me. Through the frosted shower glass, I saw a massive silhouette move past the bathroom entrance, then stop. My pulse thundered in my ears as footsteps approached. The bathroom door slammed open, hitting the wall with such force that my mirror trembled. Detective Cole Harris filled the doorway, exactly as I'd studied him in his file. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the weathered face of a man who'd seen too much and compromised too often. His tired, predatory eyes swept the small bathroom before landing on my silhouette behind the glass. That slow, greasy smile spreading across his lips made my skin crawl. But beneath my genuine fear, a core of ice-cold determination held firm. I knew everything about this man. His gambling debts, his daughter's mysterious tuition payments, his secret meetings with cartel lieutenants. He thought he was the hunter, but he had no idea he'd just walked into the most elaborate trap the FBI had ever set for a corrupt cop. I clutched my towel tighter, letting a carefully practiced tremor enter my voice. This performance had to be flawless. Everything depended on convincing him I was just another terrified victim, not the daughter of the most powerful law enforcement official in the country. The game had begun. Well, looks like I interrupted something, Harris sneered, his voice dripping with the kind of proprietary arrogance that made every nerve in my body scream. I forced myself to crack the shower door open just slightly, letting him see the fear I'd rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times. "Who are you? What do you want?" I stammered, my voice pitched perfectly between terror and indignation. "You can't just break into my house." Inside, I was cataloging everything. His posture, his tells, the way his eyes roamed with disgusting familiarity. This was the monster I'd studied in textbooks, the rot that festered within the systems designed to protect. But seeing it up close, feeling his presence invade my sanctuary, was different. It was sickeningly, viscerally real. Harris held up a folded paper with theatrical flourish. "Detective Harris, ma'am. Got a warrant to search the premises." The document looked official enough to fool most people, but I could spot the forgery from across the room. The judge's signature was in the wrong font, the seal slightly misaligned. Amateur hour, but it was all the pretense he needed. "We have reason to believe you're in possession of evidence pertaining to an ongoing investigation," he continued, taking a step into my bathroom. The small space suddenly felt suffocating, thick with the stench of stale cigarettes clinging to his cheap gray suit. My mind raced through the psychological profile I'd built of him. Harris was a predator who'd found a legal way to hunt, a man who got off on power and intimidation. He was enjoying this. My apparent vulnerability, the fear he thought he was inspiring. It was a drug to men like him. Evidence? What evidence? I let my voice crack slightly, made my eyes wide. A single, convincing tear traced down my cheek. A skill I perfected during drama classes in college. I'm just a student. His smile widened, and I noticed how his gaze wasn't meeting my eyes. He was looking at me like I was already his victim, already defeated. The arrogance was breathtaking. "Don't play dumb with me, sweetheart," he drawled, the endearment like acid on my skin. "We know what you saw in that alley last Tuesday. A little birdie told us you were filming. Just give me the phone, the SD card, whatever you got on, and we can make this all go away." There it was. The cartel connection, exactly as Dad had suspected. The confirmation sent a cold thrill through my veins, even as I maintained my terrified facade. The video he was looking for didn't exist, not the way he thought. The footage we'd created was digital bait, carefully crafted and leaked through an informant we knew was on his payroll. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, pulling my towel tighter around myself. This was the most dangerous part. I was alone with him, no immediate backup. Dad had argued against this for weeks, his protective instincts warring with his respect for the operation I'd designed. But I'd insisted. The only way to make the charges stick, to catch him red-handed, was for him to commit crimes we could document. Breaking and entering. Assault. Intimidation. All while being recorded by the sophisticated surveillance system I'd had installed throughout my apartment. Harris's patience, thin to begin with, began to fray. His face hardened, the predatory smile vanishing like smoke. "I'm tired of playing games," he growled, his hand moving to rest on his holstered weapon. The gesture was clear, unambiguous, a threat meant to break my will. But as I stood there, dripping and shivering, the fear was only surface deep. Underneath was something he couldn't see, couldn't understand. A core of pure, unadulterated steel, forged by years of training and a lifetime of being Marcus Grant's daughter. I reached out with a trembling hand and turned off the water. The sudden silence was deafening, pregnant with possibility. My gaze drifted to the small panic button, disguised as a decorative tile near the shower head. Not yet. The trap was set, but the prey needed to walk deeper into it. Harris turned and stalked out of the bathroom, leaving the door open, a constant, menacing reminder of his presence. I listened to him begin his rampage in my living room. Each crash and thud, a calculated violation meant to break my spirit. I slipped into my thick robe and positioned myself in the doorway, watching him destroy my carefully curated space. Every crash sent a practice shudder through my body as I hugged my arms around myself, the picture of a woman terrorized in her own home. But my mind was working, cataloging his every move. He was using a rough spiral search pattern, starting from the perimeter and working inward. Sloppy technique, driven by frantic urgency rather than professional discipline. The cartel was pressuring him, and it was making him reckless. Exactly what we'd hoped for. Books crashed to the floor as he swept them from my shelves, their spines cracking. My treasured criminology texts, the ones that had shaped my understanding of minds like his, scattered like fallen leaves. He ripped drawers from my modern work desk, their contents snowing onto my walnut floors. "It's not here, is it, sweetheart?" he grunted, kicking over a small side table. A framed photo of Dad and me. Him in his sharp FBI director's suit, me in my graduation gown, skittered across the floor. The crystal frame cracked with a sound that sent genuine anger spiking through me. I channeled that anger into my performance, letting out a small, choked sob. "Please," I whispered, my voice hoarse with manufactured terror. "Just tell me what you want. I don't understand." This was the delicate dance of deception. I had to appear broken while subtly guiding his attention. He was a bloodhound, but a dull one. He needed to be shown the scent. Harris straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. He stalked toward me, backing me against the wall. The heat radiating from his body was suffocating, and I could see the burst blood vessels in his eyes, signs of a man living on borrowed time and bad choices. I want the video, he breathed, his stale coffee breath washing over me. The one you took of the alley. The one that shows my associates. You give it to me, I'll walk out of here, and you forget this ever happened. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. You don't, and this nice little life of yours gets very, very complicated. I forced myself to meet his gaze, letting him see the fear he expected while my mind raced through the next phase of our plan. My laptop. I stammered, my gaze darting toward the ransacked desk. I back everything up. It's on my laptop. It was the first piece of bait, carefully placed. A flicker of triumph lit his eyes. The look of a predator who thinks he's cornered his prey. He stomped back to the desk and found my sleek laptop among the debris. As he jabbed the power button, I gave him the password, a simple one I'd set just for this occasion. While he hunched over the machine, his thick fingers clacking on the keys, I watched him grow increasingly frustrated. The laptop was a dead end, designed to be one. It contained nothing but academic papers and case studies. Legitimate work that would only fuel his desperation. When he finally slammed it shut with a furious roar, I knew we'd reached the tipping point. You're lying to me, he bellowed, his face contorted with rage. He grabbed the laptop and hurled it against the wall, where it exploded in a shower of plastic and metal. I shrieked, a genuine sound of shock, and stumbled backward. He was losing control completely. This was exactly where I needed him. As he advanced on me again, his eyes wild with frustration and barely contained violence. I let my gaze flicker, just for a second, toward the vintage cedar storage chest in the corner. It was an old family heirloom where I kept blankets and photo albums. The last place anyone would think to hide digital evidence. I held his gaze for a moment, then looked at the chest again, my eyes wide with the kind of fear he would interpret as a desperate attempt to hide my secret. It was a masterclass in misdirection, and his predator's instincts, honed by years of corruption, zeroed in on my perceived slip. That slow, cruel smile returned to his face. There we are, he rasped. I watched Harris shove me aside with casual brutality as he marched to the cedar chest. My heart hammered against my ribs, but not from fear, from anticipation. Every move he made was being recorded by 3 different hidden cameras. Every word was being captured in high-definition audio. And in a command vehicle 2 blocks away, my father and a team of FBI agents were watching this entire performance unfold. Harris' pride opened the heavy lid of the chest with the enthusiasm of a man who believed he'd outsmarted everyone. Inside were blankets, neatly folded, the same ones my grandmother had given me when I'd first moved to the city. He tore them out, throwing them carelessly onto the floor, his movements growing more frantic. Underneath were stacks of photo albums, filled with memories of family gatherings, college friends, the life I'd built independent of Dad's shadow. Harris grunted with effort as he heaved them out, his desperation palpable. He was so close to what he thought was victory. And there, at the very bottom, taped to the cedar lining exactly where I'd placed it 3 days ago, was a small black USB drive. I held my breath as he plucked it from the chest, holding it up between his thumb and forefinger like a prized jewel. The triumph in his eyes was absolute, intoxicating. He believed he had won. He believed he had outsmarted the scared little college girl, ripped apart her sanctuary, and found her deepest secret. You should have just given it to me when I asked, he said, his voice thick with smug satisfaction. He tucked the drive safely into his jacket pocket, the motion deliberate and possessive. Inside, I was fighting to keep my expression neutral. That USB drive contained exactly what we'd promised it would. A crystal-clear, time-stamped video of Detective Cole Harris accepting a briefcase full of cash from a cartel lieutenant. The meeting he'd thought was completely clean, with no surveillance and no witnesses. He'd been wrong about that too. Harris turned toward the door, giving me one last look of utter disdain. Clean this mess up, he ordered, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of a man who believed he held all the power. And remember, you never saw me. He thought the encounter was over. He thought he was walking away with his prize, his get-out-of-jail-free card. In his mind, he'd successfully intimidated a helpless victim and secured the evidence that would have destroyed his lucrative arrangement with the cartel. But as his back turned to me, as he took those first confident steps toward what he believed was freedom, I felt the transformation begin. The fear evaporated from my expression like morning mist, replaced by something cold and lethal. The terrified victim he'd spent the last hour terrorizing simply disappeared. In her place stood the woman I really was, Marcus Grant's daughter, a criminology expert who'd spent years studying predators like him, someone who just executed the most sophisticated sting operation in FBI history. He had the bait. He'd taken it willingly, greedily, completely convinced of his own superiority. Hook, line, and sinker. The dance was over. The trap was set. And Detective Cole Harris had no idea that his real nightmare was just beginning. I reached up and touched the hidden panic button disguised as a decorative air freshener on the wall. The signal would go out immediately to the command vehicle. Dad would know it was time. But first, I had something to say. Something that would wipe that smug satisfaction right off Harris's face and replace it with the terror he'd been trying to instill in me. The hunt had begun, but he was about to learn he'd been the prey all along. You know, for a veteran detective, your search technique was incredibly inefficient. My voice cut through the air like a blade, clear and steady, completely devoid of the fear that had defined it moments before. Harris froze with his hand on the doorknob, his entire body going rigid. You contaminated at least a dozen potential evidence sites. My father would be disappointed. He turned around slowly, like a man in a nightmare who knows he doesn't want to see what's behind him. The Isabella Grant he'd been terrorizing for the past hour was gone. In her place stood someone he didn't recognize, someone whose posture was straight, whose chin was up, whose eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that made seasoned criminals confess. Your father? He let out a nervous bark of laughter, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping in. What is he, a mall cop? Oh, I think I know exactly who he is, I replied, my tone level and clinical. Detective Harris. Cole, born in South Boston, 22 years on the force, 14 as a detective. 2 commendations for bravery, both involving mysteriously lost evidence for narcotics busts. A gambling debt of $63,000 owed to a loan shark with known cartel ties, and a daughter at Georgetown whose tuition is mysteriously paid by an anonymous benefactor. Each word was a hammer blow, chipping away at his bravado. I watched the blood drain from his face as the impossible became undeniable. This information wasn't in any public file. This was intelligence that only someone with serious federal connections could access. Who the hell are you? He snarled, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. I walked calmly to where the broken crystal frame lay on the floor, kneeling to pick it up. I'm just a student, I said, a faint smile playing at my lips. A student of criminology. I study people like you. People who rot the system from the inside. Men who take an oath and use it as a shield to hide their corruption. I traced the crack in the crystal over my father's face, then held the frame up so Harris could see it clearly. My father works in the same business as you, in a way. He just has a slightly larger jurisdiction. I watched Harris's eyes focus on the photograph. Watched the recognition dawn like a terrible sunrise. The sharp suit, the authoritative bearing, the face he'd seen countless times on television during FBI press conferences. Director Marcus Grant. Oh God, he whispered, the weapon feeling impossibly heavy in his suddenly nerveless fingers. Let me tell you what's on that USB drive, Cole. I continued, my voice relentless. It's a video, yes, but not the one you think. It's a 4K, time-stamped recording of you accepting a briefcase from cartel Lieutenant Miguel Vasquez 2 weeks ago in the parking garage on Elm Street. We had a little trouble with the audio, but the visual is crystal clear, especially the part where you shake his hand after counting the money. The world tilted under his feet. That meeting was supposed to have been completely clean. No surveillance, no witnesses. He stared at me, his mouth agape, as the full scope of his situation crashed down on him. And the video you were looking for? I stood up, still holding my father's photograph. The one from the alley? It was a ghost. A piece of digital bait, we created and leaked through an informant we knew was on your payroll. We just needed to see which rat would come scurrying out of his hole to retrieve it. The game was over. The horrifying truth was undeniable. This wasn't some random college student he'd intimidated. This was a federal operation, an elaborate sting designed specifically to catch him. "This is entrapment," he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. He raised his weapon, the metallic click echoing in my destroyed apartment. "Whatever you think you have, it's inadmissible. I'm a cop." I didn't even flinch at the sight of the gun. I've been trained for this moment my entire life. Breaking and entering, aggravated assault, brandishing a weapon at an unarmed civilian, attempted theft of evidence, all in the commission of a crime to aid a foreign drug cartel. That's not entrapment, detective. That's treason. I set the broken frame down on a surviving table, turning it so my father's face was visible to Harris. "And what you have in your pocket isn't evidence. It's a confession." His eyes widened in catastrophic recognition. He'd seen that authoritative face 100 times on the news, in FBI press conferences, in Justice Department briefings. "He taught me that every criminal makes a mistake," I said, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Yours was underestimating his daughter. The sound that had been building outside, the deep thrum of heavy engines, the rhythmic whump 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 of helicopter blades, suddenly became impossible to ignore. Red and blue lights began strobing against the windows, painting my destroyed apartment in frantic, flashing colors. "You set me up," he breathed, the gun wavering in his hand. "You set yourself up, Cole," I corrected him. "You made the choice to sell your badge. This was just the final exam." I reached for my phone, swiping the screen. On the wall, my smart TV flickered to life, displaying a grid of video feeds. 3 showed the room from different angles, capturing every moment of his rampage. The 4th showed a tactical map with red dots swarming the building's perimeter. The trap was complete, inescapable, and utterly damning. The splintered front door exploded inward under the force of a battering ram, and my apartment flooded with black-clad FBI agents. They moved with terrifying precision, laser sights dancing across Harris's chest from a dozen angles. "On your knees. Hands behind your head. Now!" I watched Harris, this man who'd walked into my home an hour ago as a predator, a king in his corrupt kingdom, collapse to his knees. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into his wrists as he was pressed face down against the walnut floors he'd so arrogantly violated. Through the chaos, I saw my father step through the doorway. Director Marcus Grant surveyed the wreckage with grim eyes that matched my own, intelligent, analytical, and utterly disappointed. When his gaze met Harris's for a fleeting moment, there was no anger, no gloating. Just the weary look of a man who'd seen this kind of rot too many times. "Get him out of here," Dad said quietly, but his voice carried absolute authority. As Harris was dragged away, I caught one last glimpse of his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed stare of a man who'd finally grasped the magnitude of his fall. The street outside was a fortress of federal vehicles, a show of overwhelming force. As the armored SUV carrying Harris disappeared into the night, I stood at my window wrapped in a blanket, my father's arms securely around my shoulders. "You were brilliant, Izzy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely brilliant. But don't you ever pull a stunt like this again without my express approval and a full tactical team on standby." I leaned against him, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb. He wouldn't have taken a bait if it looked like a setup, Dad. He had to believe I was alone. He had to believe he was in control. Dad sighed, tightening his embrace. "You have your mother's courage and my stubbornness. It's a dangerous combination." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw not just concern but pride. "The Academy will be lucky to have you when you're ready." It wasn't a question. Tonight had opened a door, shown me a path I'd only dreamed of before. I'd faced down a monster and hadn't blinked. I'd used my mind as a weapon and proved that justice could triumph over corruption. Months later, the news barely registered as a footnote. Former Detective Cole Harris sentenced to 18 years in federal prison on charges of corruption, conspiracy, and racketeering. The cartel he'd served was dismantled in coordinated raids, the information from his confession USB drive proving to be the key that unlocked their entire operation. For me, life took on new meaning. I finished my criminology degree at the top of my class, but my path was no longer purely academic. The world wasn't a textbook, and justice wasn't just theory. It was a fight. Standing on the steps of the FBI Academy at Quantico as a new recruit, I thought about that night in my apartment. The sanctuary that had been violated had been rebuilt, not with walls and locks, but with purpose and an unshakable commitment to the fight my father had waged his entire career. That experience taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's what you do with that fear. I channeled my terror into precision, used my mind as a weapon, and proved that the most effective traps aren't made of steel, but of intellect and an unwavering commitment to justice. Harris's downfall wasn't just his greed, it was his arrogance. He looked at a brilliant young woman and saw only a helpless victim. That fatal underestimation cost him everything. My story isn't just about one corrupt cop. It's about accountability, about ensuring that those we trust with power can't hide behind their badges when they betray that trust. It's proof that a new generation is ready to hold the line, to make sure the shield of law enforcement protects the innocent rather than sheltering the guilty. What do you think about the risks I took that night? Was it worth it to catch a corrupt cop? Or should I have played it safer? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to treat each other with respect in the discussion.